Okay, looks like the recording's going now. All right, well, hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Dallin, the Assistant Superintendent of Stormwater Quality here at the City of Oklahoma City. I would like to officially welcome everyone to our now 5th installment of this wonderful Floatables webinar series. We will begin the programming momentarily, so I want to provide a couple of pieces of information to help enhance everyone's experience during the presentation today. In order to reduce background noise, we ask that everyone keep themselves muted during the presentation. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them into chat. Brooke, Varick, and I will be monitoring chat for questions, and we will have our guest speaker answer as many questions as we have time for today. If anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please send Brooke an email, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. I'm going to go ahead and put her email address into chat at this time, so you'll have it handy. Sorry, I had to mute someone real quick. Okay. Each of the presentations in this webinar series will be available within a week or so after the webinar air date. It'll be on our website at okc.gov under Stormwater Workshops. It'll be in the section called Our 2021 Floatables Webinar Series, and of course, this will be the May edition for that series. I will post an actual link to that website where you can find all those presentations that we've done so far at the end of today's program. So if anyone has any questions at this time, please feel free to type them into chat and we'll get to those as soon as we can. But without further ado, I will start a very, very short Floatables series welcome presentation. Good afternoon and welcome to our monthly Stormwater Quality webinar series. Since this is our first attempt at a themed series, we do hope that everyone is enjoying the presentations in this series and is learning something new. Our theme for 2021 is, as you know, floatables, blowable trash that could end up in a waterway or does end up in a waterway. During this series, you will have the opportunity to hear from several different guest speakers throughout the year, including the month of August, we'll hear from our Stormwater Quality Environmental section and from the Streets and Drainage Program's River Crew. Our environmental section has a program devoted to removing floatable debris from our local waterways, and they work in conjunction with the efforts of Streets and Drainage to remove debris from the Oklahoma River and other channels. September's program will include information from the city's water conservation program, in addition to information about trash and litter from utilities' solid waste. We'll be rounding out the series with up-and-coming information from the city's sustainability program. This presentation in December will show how the planning department prepares for the future of our great city, including their plan to keep Oklahoma City just a little bit greener. We also have more traditional content for our industrial and construction stormwater permittees, while tying those subjects into the overall theme. As we've briefly mentioned, each of the presentations will be available online within a week or so after the presentation is aired. It will be available on the Workshops section of our Stormwater Quality website. I'll be posting a direct link to that page in the chat at the end of today's presentation. Some of our presentations will be live and some will be pre-recorded. We do our best to provide as much detailed, accurate information as possible while also working with the presenter's strengths and their schedule. We live and work in a beautiful community here in Oklahoma City. For more information about stormwater, what we're up to, and local regulations, be sure to visit our website. All right, well, up next is the main presentation for today's webinar. Our presentation features, sorry, my brain is faster than my mouth apparently. Today's presentation, it is highlighting Project Director for Inframark, Mr. John Bannon. Inframark has been contracted to operate the City of Oklahoma City's wastewater treatment plants, as well as managing a portion of the duties for the industrial wastewater pretreatment program for the City of Oklahoma City. We were also going to hear today from the city's Michelle Almiller, but unfortunately she's unable to participate in this month's session, but we will hear from her in future webinars. Again, if anyone has any questions during today's presentation, be sure to type them into chat. John, are you there? And are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, I am. So
excellent.
Let me know if we are up and live with the main slide. Let me see. There we go. Is it presenting?
Yes. So,
okay.
No, it went away.
Oh.
As soon as I say yes. Now I think we're seeing your screen, but not the presentation.
All right, let's see here. Why is that not doing that? Let me stop presenting. Out. And try this again. All right, did it come up this time?
Well, it did, and then okay, now it's back. It went away, and now it's back.
Okay, so it is my title slide. We are seeing the same thing.
Yeah, we're also seeing the overview for the next slide, or the.
It's not showing presentation mode, is it?
Right, yeah.
All right. I don't know any idea on how to change that one off, maybe. I have it in because it's showing on my one screen as presentation mode, so I don't know how to. Otherwise, we can press on.
It should be fine.
Yeah, so we can live with that probably.
Sure. Thank you, John.
Okay. Yeah, you just get a preview to the next slide. So, barring any other, minor technical difficulties, welcome everybody. Appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to share some information about the floatables and how as things enter into the collection system, some of that is coming from stormwater and into the plant, and how we deal with floatables inside of the treatment system, also trying to again prevent them from getting to the treatment plant as well, or through the treatment plant and out into our waterways. So we'll be talking about that through today. I am broadcasting and working from home, as so many of us still are doing here with COVID. So it is potential that my 4 canine office assistants may decide to chime in. HR has already been contacted, and there seems to be very little HR can do to monitor their performance. But again, bear with me, and I'll try and mute if they decide to chime in. So. Okay, so briefly, when we take a look at our wastewater treatment system, here in the U.S. we look at it and we consider that we're an advanced society, we're an industrial society, and we move through things. But when you start taking a look back at treatment plants, and then even probably less, how long we've been focusing on stormwater protection and really concerned there, it's even been fewer and fewer years of actually regulating or having a conscious decision to protect our waterways and to do better with what we are doing, especially in our metro and our populated areas. The last bullet here is the one that always, even to me, is to think that even as recent as 1960, only 50% of the U.S. population was even being served by treatment plants. So, that was 10 years prior to the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, which really elevated regulations and the focus on safe drinking water and clean water. But, now going back, we're only 60 years removed from that time period. So yeah, even though, we're advancing in technologies and advancing in our efforts to clean our waterways or keep our waterways clean, either one of those two things are what we're doing. We either have to clean what's been dirty or we have to prevent it from getting any dirtier. And, way back when, and the first uses, of Roman sewers or even having chamber pots in the home, it's kind of interesting to think how people were impacted in January when we had the massive power outages and issues that, people had in their homes is, to think about the basic necessities of, needing power or heat or power to be able to operate the water plants and still provide water, power to operate the lift stations to still remove the sewage from the neighborhoods and things, or how close were people getting back to having to go to the outhouse and those type of situations. So just some brief facts about the Oklahoma City treatment system, as a whole. We do have 4 treatment plants located, throughout the metro area with a very large service area. I think a lot of times people may not realize that when it comes to the square acreage or mileage of Oklahoma City, that we are actually larger in a service area than the city of Houston, which the city of Houston is the 4th largest city in the country. And Oklahoma City's service area actually sprawls greater than the Houston service area. So it's something that can of course create challenges, but it's also something to be proud of in what we do here. Those 4 treatments sit on 130 acres of land. And one of the things that stands to mention as we talk about floatables and blowable trash is in our lovely Oklahoma weather that we have is debris and trash that is just throughout the roadways and the areas does frequently end up in our treatment facilities and blowing into our treatment process that the operators have to manually remove from many of those locations. So, again, tree lines, fence lines, and things of that nature are actual physical barriers that are part of the treatment process because of that. We daily have a 111 million gallon treatment design capacity, and that is our what our design is. Our average daily flows typically around the 70 range for what we have. And then throughout the city, there are 73 lift stations that bring the water to our 4 treatment plants. So that operation is managed by 85 people, multiple licenses, as we all know, with lots of maintenance activities. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today with regard to floatables impact the maintenance activities that we have to perform on a daily basis or on a periodic basis. Overall, annually is over 30 billion gallons treated. We do use 2.5 billion gallons a year for reuse at the power plant. So we have a direct impact to the power industry. And you can see tens of thousands of lab samples and work orders to complete the process. And the solids, or the material that we do separate from the liquid stream, is then 100% used in beneficial land application in agriculture throughout the metro Oklahoma City area, benefiting all of our farmers. And when it comes to biosolids, one of the things to mention is trash, if you will, plastic debris, visible trash, visible material in the biosolids cannot be land applied. So, all of the biosolids is screened and treated, and we have to prevent or protect any of the biosolids from getting any of that wind-blown trash or blowable trash into the biosolids, because then the farmers will not accept the material, nor can it be used in the field. because our birds and other things will pick that trash out of the material, and so it's unacceptable to have those kind of trash or blowables in the biosolids as well. Just an overview of aerial photo of the 4 plants, North Canadian, which is actually in the northeast sector of the city, Jones proper, if you will. Deer Creek and Chisholm Creek are actually only 3 miles apart, located really actually in Edmond, proper location. And then South Canadian down south off of May and 149th. We list Witcher in here, and Witcher is a large pump station that has 3 lagoons that potentially trap blowable trash and enters into the pump system and to the wet well, again, as trash and things in the area enter into these lagoons can become problems for us. Again, this is one of my favorite all-time pictures. This is the job we do and the satisfaction that we get from, the influent water and what is that is a standard consistency of that wastewater coming in to, the water that goes out the back end of the plant to meet all the regulatory requirements and to, provide that environment for our aquatic life in the North Canadian rivers, South Canadian River, and surrounding area where we eventually ends up in Lake Eufaula. So one of the things many of you may have or may not have seen floatables in the headlines. And this floatable, taking a look at, is Greece. And this article, very recently in this month, was an article coming out of the UK about a company called Severn Trent that identified a complete line stoppage, which they think is the largest grease line stoppage in history. That 300-ton fatberg, as the headline reads, they estimate basically it was in a 36-inch pipe, 3 feet high, and was over 1,000 yards long of grease stoppage that clogged that line. They still do not have it clear, and they are estimating it's going to take a month, and it will be June by the time they actually are finally able to clear that line from that material that is in the pipeline. And then just an internal picture there on the right of a pipe in Sherwood, Oregon, of a grease buildup. And we'll talk a little more into that further. And I think that is something that Michelle will be able to talk a lot into as we talk about a FOG program, fats, oil, and grease, and that impact. So I'll show a little more on that later. But here again is our plastic pollution. So as an example, in the top photo of our blowables and floatables that get into our lagoons and things of that nature, along with some algae growth and things of that nature, the only treatment process available to us is that it has to be physically removed. And then I'm sure many of us have seen all kinds of pictures. The internet is full of things, and I think it's impressive how the public awareness is increasing when it comes to what is the plastic pollution. Kind of a sidebar, if folks like watching documentaries and things of that nature, there is on Netflix right now a documentary called Seaspiracy. And the Seaspiracy is a documentary that talks about the global plastic pollution and plastics and trash that are entering into the world's oceans and waterways. And it's a really, really neat documentary for those of you that like to geek out over these kind of environmental situations that we're faced. It's very well done. I highly recommend it. And any of you have kids and grandkids or fans of Disney themselves, remember the movie Finding Nemo, right? And all drains lead to the ocean, kid. It's been a tagline that has been used, for public awareness for a long time. And, again, I think it's something, important that we continue to bring awareness to what's going on. I always find it very satisfactory when out in public and you see the plastic grocery bag blowing across a parking lot and somebody steps on it, puts it in their pocket, or brings it to their car, or puts it in a garbage can. Is great to see responsibility within our society for things like that. And so with that, there is hope as those things are, getting into our waterways or blowing. The picture on the left is from an article that came out in recent months from a company in Australia. And so all of these pictures here are deployments of this trash net throughout these 4 different locations there in Australia, showing, as a means to, collect that trash on those stormwater and those waterways to, collect and prevent that. We have Mr. Trash Wheel, in Baltimore, and Seabin on the bottom is a unit that's been deployed in San Diego Bay. Both of those are, innovation and, if you will, technology from somebody that, wanted to, clean up their harbors and clean up their ways. Basically, trash convection screenings with a conveyor that, puts it into a bin. So then that material can be disposed of. So, one of the things that I like about all 3 of these is it's not massive technological advances to be able to positively impact the environment and positively remove this material in so much as a low-tech way is possible. So again, it's why I feel there is hope for managing these type of situations. So back to the FOG program and, how one of the other main floatables, impacts us at the plants and what we have is grease down the drain. And, FOG programs or fats, oils, and grease become a lot of public information campaigns and things of that nature so that, while we can manage the commercial elements of grease straps and separators and inspecting grease haulers or grease collection at our restaurants and things of that nature on side of the pre-treatment program that Michelle oversees. We have that side of things, but when we take a look at the number of homes out there in every single one of those houses with that kitchen drain, and what are people putting down the drain? And, common thing that happens with our grease is people will run that grease down the drain with hot water. They turn on the hot water tap so that they can keep the grease liquid and flowing into the drain so that they don't clog their home plumbing systems. As soon as that grease hits the colder water of the collection system is when it turns into those fatbergs and we get the grease to congeal and clog the lines. So, one of the things that, we see is you don't see a lot of typical home laterals clogging with grease. The homeowners don't have a problem. They don't perceive grease as a problem because it's not impacting their home plumbing systems. But we see it in the municipal system because of the temperature change that congeals the grease into the lift stations that it combines in and making its way all the way to the wastewater treatment facility. And at any time through the presentation, if you have a question, raise a hand, type it in chat. I do have the chat window open, and feel free to ask any questions that you might have, and I'll do the best I can. So impacts to our lift station. Okay, some of you may have seen many of these around town. or some of them are inconspicuous and camouflaged, if you will, so that they don't present anything that is negatively seen in our community. But the challenge is most everything is below ground, and we're going to take a look at the impact mostly of what we have with grease into our lift stations. Here are two examples. Both of these are pictures from lift stations in which grease and floatables, which may even be plastics or other debris. And the challenge that we have is, of course, it sits on top of the water, and the pumps sit on the bottom of what's known as the wet well, where all the water collects in, and they also sit off the bottom of the floor, if you will, a few inches. So at no time does the material completely all the way get to the bottom to be pumped out. The only way to remove the floatables in the lift station is we have to deploy a Vactor truck, and the Vactor truck has to actually vacuum the floatables off of the top of the lift station wet well. So one of the routine inspections that the crews are doing is determining when the floatables have gotten bad enough in a lift station, which then requires a corrective work order for the truck to deploy and actually clean out the lift station, which results in an expense then to the city. How the grease impacts and can potentially create an overflow or sanitary sewer overflow, in which the wastewater is then running into the streets and creating an environmental issue, has to do with the floats. The three balloon-looking structure are what is a common float structure that is used to control the pumps, turning them off and on. So the float that you see that is closest to the water level, that is the off float, or when that float hangs as it is now, the pump would be in a off position. The next float in the middle is the on float, and that is the one that, as it would tip, it would tell the pumps to turn on. The third float at the highest level here is what we consider a high level float, which either will turn on a second pump or potentially could trigger an alarm, depending on the configuration of the lift station. Floatables and grease create problems in that material will coat these floats, and if the floats become coated in grease, they're hollow inside. So they act as a float, meaning when the water level gets to them, they will tip sideways. If they have a buildup of grease and material that cakes onto that float, the float will stay in the position you see it in. It will continue to hang straight, and the pump will fail to turn on because the float does not have the ability to tip, because it has been counterbalanced by the accumulation of grease and materials around the floats. So again, a common lift station inspection will ensure that the float cables are free, the floats are freely hanging, and that there is not an accumulation of buildup of any grease or rags or any other floatable material that has come into contact with the floats. One of the other things that I have lived through firsthand is the use of contractors potentially using spray foam or the expanding foam in which to seal leaks, I&I, or other areas of our collection system. And what can happen is in high rain events or rain events, the groundwater or other water will push that foam out from its location and pushes that foam into the collection stream directly into that water flow, and then either clogging manholes, clogging lines, or potentially making its way to the treatment plant. I've seen this used twice or 2 times different ways in my career. As you see, the manhole, where they tried to use it to seal the manhole, potentially for odors or issues. And secondly, on the right, what you see here is where lateral lines protrude into the manhole structure. What you see here is correctly done. These laterals are grouted in with a cement-based grouting and a cement-based product as they protrude into the manhole. I have seen spray foam used to center and to grout in pipes. And then the same thing happens as the groundwater surrounds those manhole columns or areas, that groundwater will actually push that insulation out of the joints or out from around the pipe, and then pushes it into the manholes, becoming a problem and debris into the collection system. So now we'll switch from, we've got the water that has now gotten into our manholes and into the collection system, going through the lift stations and starts coming to the plant. And we'll talk a little bit about how that is actually impacting and where it impacts the treatment process and how that happens. So the layout you see here is a typical conventional activated sludge plant with the major components of screenings, grit removal. We have primary clarifiers, the aeration basins, secondary clarifiers, and chlorination before we sample and allow that water to go into phase 8 or go out into the environment. So as you see, the red circles illustrate just how many of the treatment processes can significantly be impacted by the floatables and the blowable trash that gets into our system. And so we'll show some of that debris here. A lot of the things that we see come to the plant, questions are always, how did that get down the drain? And many times operators there must be a manhole open somewhere and somebody's dumping their trash right into the collection system, or things of that nature. And the truth is, it is really truly amazing what will make it by a drain, what will make it through a toilet, or potentially, even if we do have broken lines or things of that nature in the system, when we see what comes to us at the plants. So we'll look at each one of these a little bit further. So starting out with our bar screens. So our bar screens are very important, and our screening is very important at the beginning of the plant to help remove a lot of that large debris and a lot of that large trash. Many of the channels and canals and things that are at the plant are open. And so unfortunately, we do get a lot of blowable trash and things that may come, into the plant and get caught in the screens. That picture on the bottom actually was posted by another operator, and they actually have a shelf. That's a shelf at a lift station. And their lift station has a bar screen. And as they pull toys, if you will, the children's toys and things, as they pull that off the bar screen, they have started a collection of what they have pulled off the screens and put there as a means, right? If you can't have fun at work, and what good is it to come to work? So obviously we have a challenging job with plenty of interesting odors and sights, and as well in things of that nature. And so this is obviously a good-natured, good-humored operator that has started a toy collection. It also is not uncommon to find money, as you see that $20 bill sitting in a pile of screenings. Again, not uncommon to find partial bills come through the plant. Personally, I've never found anything larger than a 10 in my years of working, unfortunately. But as you see here, There's a 20, and I have seen other operators posting pictures and bragging of other denominations from time. So I think to each our own. If it's a $1 bill, are you willing to reach in there, clean it, and grab it? Or where do you set your level of willingness to pocket that bar screen find, if you will? The other items up there at the top are ones that very commonly cause problems for our equipment that fully fall into our floatable blowables. Wine corks. Many people save them, create crafts out of them, and do things of that nature. Yet many of them still make it into our waterways in some way, shape, or form. The milk jug caps that you see there, and also the other one that becomes very challenging to our equipment, causing problems, is the actual tear-off tab. That little, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch plastic strip that you rip off underneath the milk cap. Those just find their way. They're just skinny enough to make it through the screens. They're small enough that they make it inside of our pumps and equipment, and then find some of the smallest tolerances of equipment to potentially cause problems. And our ramen noodle packs and that cellophane type wrappers and material like that ends up 3 counties over if it gets out of our trash and ends up, in one way, shape, or form into our system. The grit chamber is the next process after our screens. And what you see in the bottom right is actually a well-operated, good grit removal system in which, while we're talking floatables, most of the grit, think settables. And the grit is the heavy, inorganic sand material and things of that nature. One of the challenges in the operation of the grit system is that we change the hydraulic flow so that we slow it down to allow that heavy material to settle at the bottom of the chamber. Think about a snow globe. You shake up the snow globe, you let the snow globe sit, and the material settles to the bottom of the snow globe. What we're doing is we're stopping the shake, we're slowing the flow, and we're allowing the grit to settle. But when we allow the grit to settle, if we have a floatables and a grease problem at the plant, we are going to get those floatables, and that material is going to come out with the water flow out the top of our grit chambers or continue to flow through the system. And the grit chamber is not made to remove that grease and settable or floatable material from the process. It is designed specifically only to handle the grit at the bottom. So there's no means at the top of our tanks, at the top of our materials, to actually remove those floatables unless we actually have to do it with a maintenance event, in a special occasion. Our primary clarifiers, this is the workhorse of the wastewater treatment plant, in which in the primary clarifier, we have the material in this tank is actually designed to manage the floatables and the settables. So at the top, you see on the left-hand side here, you see what we have is the scum trough and the skimmer arm. Those pieces of equipment, and this piece of equipment is specifically designed to remove the floatables from our treatment process. This is where we can skim the top of the water and then remove that from the treatment process. It's the only piece of equipment in the treatment plant that is, as a mechanical piece of equipment, is designed to remove our floatables and our grease. Every place else in our process, it requires a maintenance tech or an operator to manually skim with pool nets or use booms, water booms and things of that nature to skim across the top. in order to remove that. So they become manual work for what they have to do. Now in that clarifier are floatables. Now these floatables are more due to the process, and we can create floatable process or floatables that potentially could pass through the plant and end up into our environment. And that is our suspended solids. And in here you see a clarifier that is not operating properly, in which a lot of the sludge is floating to the surface. And then in the center column, the rounded center column in that yellow area, you're seeing a large scum and grease buildup in that area. And the only way to, again, fix this would be to actually have to skim those solids off there once you've fixed one of the issues. We have biological issues that can be actually causing the sludge to rise. And then there could be physical issues with the clarifier or the operations of the clarifier that are creating these conditions. This is a danger for us in treatment, because if that material, the treated water of a clarifier is what is at the very top of the clarifier that goes over the weir that is on the outside of that circle. That is where the treated water leaves this tank. That is supposed to be the clear and clean water. And so these can become problems. While we do use chlorination for disinfection in Oklahoma City, UV disinfection is impacted greater when we have floatables and material inside the water, but it is very similar to how it is negatively impacted in chlorine. So there is a relationship between what we're going to talk about here today. Solids that are remaining in the water. So you have particles, floatables, or material that's in the water. You either have a UV light ray, or you potentially have a molecule of chlorine that is intended to get in contact with a pathogen or disease-causing organism. So in the diagram here, the little red dots, represent our pathogens. The little brown dots representing solids or floatables in the water. When the treatment system is not working properly and we have too much material that is not intended to be in the water, the UV rays, as you see by the arrows, come into contact with the settables or the solids that are in there and don't get a chance to come into contact with the pathogens or the organisms we want them to do. And chlorine is the same way. The chlorine is circulating through the water and coming into contact with all of those floatables or solids that are still in the water and aren't able to come into contact to adequately disinfect the water. So again, materials that remain, still or make it through the treatment process then negatively, impact the system. On a macro scale, those large debris, the plastic bag, or that ramen noodle wrapper, if that were to make it through the water flow, it potentially can actually make its way between the UV lamps and actually attach itself or stick to the lens or the glass, that the UV lamp is. And that directly would prevent that UV light from coming into contact with the other material. So filters ahead of the system, screens ahead of the system, and a constant check to make sure that we are not getting debris into the UV channel, because much of it is open, as you see on the top picture, can be affected by those floatables. And lastly, one of the things that we take a look at that becomes a floatable and is sometimes a side effect of treatment is algae. This is the effluent channel at the North Canadian Wastewater Treatment Plant. Near the back, or if you will, underneath the catwalk there, you'll see the dark green, blackish buildup. That is all algae. And as it attaches itself to the sidewalls, to the floors of channels, to different things of that nature, when that algae breaks off, it becomes a floatable and potentially can pass into the receiving streams and cause a problem. Algae on the weirs of the clarifier, algae in all of our channels, all of those areas is actually one of the primary inspection criteria that DEQ will look at when they're in our plants. It is one of the maintenance activities that is a continual basis to hose down and clean out the weirs, hose down, clean out the channels, and on a scheduled basis, we take all structures down every year, drain them, completely clean all algae and material from the tank, and then refill the tank to start over so that we can manage the buildup of algae and things of that nature in throughout our materials. So with that, does anybody have any specific questions over anything we went over, or would like me to explain anything further? We can always back up and go that route as well.
I don't see any questions in chat, so if anyone has any questions, now would be the time. Great information, John. Thank you so much. If I end up seeing any questions later, I'll be sure and mention them to you, but I still don't see anything. I don't see anybody typing in chat at this point. So thank you so much. What great, interesting information. A few of us used to work at North Canadian wastewater facility, and so I always find it fun to revisit some of those topics. It's good stuff. So and grease, greases and oils, or a lot of times we'll encounter fuels out in stormwater.
Sure.
all that floats, and it's definitely a big problem everywhere. So
That is a good point. Actually, one of the criteria in all 4 plants permits have what we call the narrative requirement in the permit. There's many areas where there's a quantitative result of something we test for. There is a narrative requirement that our discharge to the river be free of visible floatables, oily sheens, or of material. So, while there might not be a quantifiable measurement of so many floatables, there is a requirement for a daily visual inspection of our discharge to the rivers.
yeah, cool. Good stuff. I'm sure we could probably talk for quite a bit longer, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna go on. Thanks again, John. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Up next, our Community Relations Coordinator, Brooke Barrick, will provide additional information on local programs that help keep our community clean. Brooke, please share your screen.
Okay. Thank you, John. That was a super interesting, fascinating information. I learned a lot from your presentation today, so I really appreciated seeing it. Okay, can you see that, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to give a quick 5-minute update on our recent outreach highlights and some of the events that have been going on. One of our biggest things that we have going right now is our Waterway Clean Sweep events, and we have a couple spotlights to give out. Boeing claimed the first event of the year. They had 15 volunteer hours. They collected 32 bags of trash for a total of almost 900 pounds of trash. So huge kudos to Boeing for starting off the season right. We followed up with a DEQ waterway cleanup where we had 72 volunteer hours, 111 bags of trash, which is an insane, crazy number. and 3,000, almost 3,200 pounds of trash was collected at that event. And you can see the picture on this slide is one of the ones from the DEQ cleanup. You can see how much trash was accumulated, and they had already collected probably 6 or 7 bags of trash from this spot before I took the photo, and you can still see how much they were working on. So great job for DEQ for having an amazing cleanup. Our next open volunteer date is going to be this Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. if it doesn't get rained out. If you're interested in participating on Friday, we still have some open spots available, so feel free to email me and let me know if you're interested in participating, and I can give you the info for it. We held our rain barrel pickup event. It was Saturday, May 8th and Saturday, May 15th. We sold a total of 374 rain barrels just for OKC. We actually had over 800 rain barrels sold in the entire OKC metro area. So our next sale will be next spring 2022, and we will determine the dates in the fall for that spring sale. These are our 3 volunteer programs in case you haven't heard them before in our other Floatable series webinars. We have our Adopt a City Street program, we have the Waterway Clean Sweep program, and the Curbs to Creeks. If you're interested in getting involved or setting up any of these programs for your organization, feel free to email me, contact me, let me know. And then in case you missed the last one, these are our totals for our spring special collection. It was on April 10th. So we had about 450 people, residents come through, 45,000 pounds of tires, 406 pounds of ammunition, 375 pounds of medication, and over 15,000 pounds of computers. So you can see the picture, the guys on the right, they were collecting all of our computer equipment for our stormwater team. And that is all I have for you guys today. So any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to contact me.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I don't see any questions in chat. Of course, anyone who has any questions, feel free to reach out to Brooke. I've put her email address into chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her later, as she said. As a reminder, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's presentation, please send Brooke an email to request it. We don't want requests for those certificates into chat because we may or may not have your email address linked to your username in Teams. So we just need you to request those via email. And I did put that information into chat as well. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website in about a week or so. It just kind of depends on the availability of our Public Works Community Relations folks. I'm going to put that link into chat at this time. So you can go directly to all of our presentations so far in this series. Well, thank you all for attending today's session. We hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and learned something new. We'll see you next month on June 15th at 1 p.m. for the next installment of this Floatables webinar series. The presentation will be another installment from the Construction Stormwater Program. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks again for attending.